Dragonkin the Banished, one of the big new ARPGs set to come out this year, releasing into early access on March 6th. I was lucky enough to be invited to demo the game and give you a little sneak peek of what's to come. I wanted to share my full and honest review of it, and to start off, I think Dragonkin has a lot of potential. If there's anything to take away from this video, it's that the ideas and features in Dragonkin the Banished are actually really good. I just feel like there's something lacking in execution, mostly in the combat and enemies. But understanding that this is a demo and the game is literally not even in early access yet, some of the execution can definitely be worked on over time. I think it's pretty apparent Dragonkin the Banished looks and plays like a Diablo 4 clone, but it has some great ideas to make the experience fresh and give you extra build customization options. Overall, it ended up being a pretty good 10 or so hours of demo fun. I definitely feel like it's going to be one of those games that you can turn your brain off for a bit and casually obliterate monsters for a couple hours. Now, I do want to say that I had my doubts about the game when I started playing it. Something felt so familiarly off about the movement, the combat, the enemy AI, the design. Playing the prologue, I almost immediately got this uniquely odd feeling, kind of like I'd played this game before, but not quite. So I paused the game and looked up the developer, Echo Software. Where had I heard that name before? Ah yes, Warhammer Chaosbane, a Diablo 3 clone I reviewed way back in 2022. I had the same feeling with that game back then as I do with Dragonkin the Banished now. So many good ideas, but just a weird feeling to the game. Like the gameplay is so close to the games it's trying to emulate, but almost too close. It's kind of like the Uncanny Valley feeling where something looks almost human but not quite, so your brain kind of freaks out. That's how I feel playing Dragonkin the Banished. I've played so many ARPGs over the last 3 years, and this one feels the closest to playing Diablo 4, but it's just not quite Diablo 4. But that's actually a huge accomplishment, because Diablo 4's combat and gameplay is some of the smoothest demon smashing I've ever enjoyed. That's pretty much the only highlight of D4 for me, so it's not a bad thing that Dragonkin is trying to emulate that combat feeling. Obviously, there are other things that are really D4-like that I can tell even from the limited demo, but I don't want to waste your time naming them all. Honestly, if you find D4 even a bit appealing, you'll be at home here in Dragonkin the Banished. Maybe even more so, because right now there are no plans to add an in-game cash shop, so they already have extra points with me for not doing that. But the best thing that Echo Software has managed to do here is take that D4 formula and add on to it with new features and new ways to customize your gameplay. First up, probably the biggest draw of the game so far, is the Ancestral Grid, which creates an incredible amount of room for build customization and makes it exciting to find the hex pieces that drop from enemies. Each class has their own grid shape, which you unlock more space in as you gain more levels. Each of these little hex pieces can have a skill or modifiers or both, and you fit them together on these grids like a little puzzle to create the best build you can. And it's not easy. The demo allowed me to try preset characters that were already level 35 and run them through the endgame dungeon generator. I wanted to try and change up the builds with hex pieces I found on the ground, but it's not as easy as it looks. The hex pieces come in different shapes and sizes, and they have to fit whatever you have on the board unless you want to completely replace a chunk of it just to fit whatever you picked up. I tried to do this with each character and spent about 30 minutes just trying different combinations of hex pieces to try and get some new modifiers on there. Imagine putting together a puzzle, but none of the pieces look the same, and some of the pieces can't be placed next to each other because they don't have the right modifier tag, and some of the pieces have a mix of modifiers that work and some that don't, which makes you think that you can optimize the placement in another way, but you can't place it anywhere else, so you take off more pieces to try another way, and that fails too, so you keep trying different combinations until you eventually give up and you try to put it back the way it was before, but you forgot how it fit before, and now you're trying to put together something completely new with the same pieces, and your character actually comes out worse than it was when you started. It's a bit complicated, but it does keep your attention and gives such a high importance to finding the right hex piece for your personal puzzle that you're trying to put together. Pray to the RNG gods, because once you get up to high level content and need to optimize your build, finding the specific hex piece that you want may take a while. I do really like the idea though. It's similar to the hex grid system from Undecember if you ever played that, but Dragonkin introduces a little twist to make it different. Another fresh system is the Wyrmling Pet. These are actual combat pets that can be given skills to correspond with your skills. There are 4 types of Wyrmlings, each with a different type of elemental power and skill set, and from what I can tell, they are an extremely important part of your build. When looting enemies, you'll get Wyrmling skill hex pieces that when placed on your Ancestral Grid next to one of your skills, those two skills will now be cast at the same time. So if you take a closer look at my gameplay, you can actually see the little guy following alongside the characters, and when I do certain attacks, the Wyrmling performs his corresponding attack as well. This added quite a bit of extra damage and utility, so optimizing your Wyrmling and its synergies with your skills seems like it'll be a large part of your progression. It does also add some additional complexity to the Ancestral Grid, so get ready for 2 sets of skills to try and perfectly place into a hard-locked grid. I didn't play around with this too much, but the character attributes are pretty simple. There are only 5 main attributes, and you can allocate your points in them however you see fit. They give you some nice bonuses to choose from, in addition to increasing your character's overall stats, which is incredibly impactful. These preset builds went a little crazy with the attributes, and because the monsters were a bit overtuned in the dungeons, I had to shuffle some points around to give me a chance to survive. It was really easy to shuffle the points, and it also made a huge difference in gameplay. I mean, completely night and day. So I really appreciate that Dragonkin has the mindset that the player should have the ability to update their entire build anytime they want, and the only thing holding them back is experience and loot. I don't think it would fit too well in this game if you had to lock in decisions and couldn't respec freely. Just my opinion though. As far as crafting goes, I didn't have access to much in the demo, but I did have access to the Jeweler. Here you can craft a ring for your character, using your crafting resources looted from enemies to choose which stats you want on the only ring you can equip. There are different rarities that take more and more crafting materials, so choose wisely and upgrade when you can. The only other feature that I had access to in the demo was this endgame repeatable dungeon, but I was able to do the prologue to the campaign as well. And I really like the prologue. When early access comes, I might just get the game to try the campaign. Just like Diablo, it's a story-focused, objective-based campaign, and I really just love the spectacle of it all. The prologue had you taking over heroes at different points of this extremely important battle, basically the last stand against a large Dragonkin coming from another dimension to dominate the world. I was also able to try out the Ranger hero in the prologue, which was super cool, but I didn't get access to her in the endgame portion, just the Barbarian, Sorceress, and Crusader hero. If the rest of the campaign is like this though, I think it would turn out pretty great. Just keep up the spectacle, make the cutscenes all badass and exciting, throw in some challenging bosses and varying gameplay, and you have an extremely solid campaign in the works here. Alright, a couple of nitpicky things before I end the video. Earlier, I quickly mentioned that the enemy AI needs some work, and the combat feels a bit off. Mind you, these are things that can be worked on over the course of early access, but I think those are 2 main pillars of ARPGs that will make or break the game for a lot of people, so I think it's only right that we talk about it even for a demo. The combat feels a bit off. It's not just floaty, it also sometimes feels like the enemies just don't care that you're attacking them. There's no weight to your attacks until the enemies die, at which point they ragdoll and disappear. It's really hard to explain it, but even though the skill effects look pretty nice, the monsters don't really react to them in any way. They just continuously float towards you like zombies in The Walking Dead. Skills are cool though, pretty much basic ARPG stuff, but they do look nice. Using a skill kind of feels weird though. Some of them are smooth, others are a bit jarring. At least with these demo characters, I was constantly running out of resources to use any skills. It's almost too dependent on resources. I would use 1 or 2 seconds of spender abilities and have to use 6 seconds of my basic attack to build that resource back up. And the basic attack didn't do any damage at all, so it felt really bad to have to sit there and spam my basics just to rebuild my skill resource. And because I was running out of my skill resource too quickly, skills would just abruptly end, and my guy would just sit there for half a second before I realized that my skill was no longer happening. I don't really know the word for it, but it's just a bit awkward. It affects the flow of combat pretty heavily, so I do hope that they refine this over time. As for the enemies and other NPCs in the game, this also feels slightly off. The best example I can give you is that sometimes the enemy AI targets you from really far away, and you have a long line of enemies start to form, running at you one after another. And sometimes the AI targets you from too far away, and when they finally reach you, the enemies realize that they're too far away, so they politely leave and recover all their health. This is called leashing, basically keeping the enemies to a certain range and location so they don't follow you across the dungeon. But either the leashing is too strict or the AI needs to stop targeting me from across the dungeon. You can't have strict leashing and a wide targeting system, or you have enemies constantly resetting themselves. Even worse, but actually just funny, are the human NPCs in the large city that you use as an overworld. Again, this is a demo, I'm not expecting the graphics to be perfect, but damn, some of this really takes you out of the fantasy. Like, what is this bard doing? The hammer guys aren't hammering anything. This guy kind of seems like he needs to go to a psych ward, and I can't figure out if the dungeon master is supposed to be wearing armor or a dress, or maybe a dress under armor, or maybe armor under a dress. Again, it's a demo, so I'm not going to criticize them for not having the best graphics or huge enemy diversity or complete animations, but when you put all of this together, the entire game, it feels kind of cheap right now. I just hope that they have some better enemy and NPC AI planned for the early access launch, or a lot of people will get a bad first impression and bounce off. Funny enough, this is actually something I critiqued about Warhammer Chaosbane as well. The enemies in that game were all over the place, and it made it really difficult to fully enjoy the combat. Dragonkin is already so much better than that, so props to Echo Software for making that better. It's just something to look out for in the future of this game. I know combat is the most important pillar of gameplay for a lot of people, so this is something that may keep you from enjoying the game. I will say that combat is the most important pillar of gameplay for me, something that I've made extremely clear in all of my previous reviews of other ARPGs, so if you care about my opinion, just know that the combat here is a bit floaty. Not the best, but it's not bad. It's fast-paced, so it can get pretty hectic, which I do like in ARPGs. The build customization keeps you entertained and helps make the combat feel more rewarding, since it's your effort paying off, but it's definitely going to need some work over the course of early access. Overall, the game is turning out to be pretty decent. The core gameplay is solid, even though it definitely feels like a fresh early access beta. The customization features and campaign are enough to get me interested to at least give it a try. I'll tell you the best thing about the game though, I saved the best for last: WASD movement. That's right, from the start you can move with WASD so we don't hurt those precious wrists clicking 500 times a minute. Anyway, let me know what you think about how the game looks so far, if it's something that you may like or not. This is one of the many ARPGs that we have coming out this year, so if this type of video is something you enjoy, let me know, and hopefully I'll have more demo reviews for you coming this year. But most importantly, I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you liked it, and subscribe for more ARPG content like this. I hope you enjoy your dragon-filled adventures, and I can't wait to see what we talk about next.